Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, we're jumping right in today to deconstruct a pretty wild narrative, one that claims the world is right now in the middle of a massive showdown between two totally different visions for the future.
So our whole explainer today kicks off with this really provocative question, right? According to our source material, the core claim is that a huge geopolitical standoff is happening right now. And we're not just talking about angry speeches, we're talking military moves, major economic threats, the whole nine yards. So let's unpack what's really going on here, according to this narrative.
All right, to get our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts, exactly as the source lays it out. We'll start with a conflict over Greenland, then a big showdown in Davos. We'll look at what they call the old order, the vision for a new one, and this thing called the Board of Peace.
First up, the Greenland conflict. The source calls this a suicide mission, and it frames it not as some simple political tiff, but as a seriously dangerous military escalation.
So here's the claim, straight up. The story goes that when President Trump showed interest in acquiring Greenland, some European NATO partners didn't just object, they actually deployed military forces. The source presents this as a very clear, very loud signal saying, back off, we're ready to use force to stop this.
Now, as evidence for this, the source points to this exact quote from Mark Carney, and the interpretation here is pretty explosive. The narrative claims this is him pledging military support against a fellow NATO member, the U.S., by bringing up Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all clause, all in the context of Greenland. That's a huge deal.
Okay, so what happens next? According to the source, the U.S. hits back, but with economic weapons. The argument is that this isn't just some random trade tiff. No, it's a direct response to that military move in Greenland. So first, there's this reminder like, hey, remember who's been paying for your defense for decades? Then, bam, 10% tariffs on 8 European nations. And the threat is clear. If we don't get a deal, those tariffs are jumping to 25%.
And this is where the whole thing just blows up into something much, much bigger. The source claims this isn't just about Greenland or tariffs. It's supposedly part of a hybrid war, a kind of quiet, long-term fight using culture and ideas instead of bombs. That's been going on, they say, since 1971, all with the goal of weakening the U.S. from the inside out.
All right, that sets the stage for part 2, the Davos showdown. We're moving from the icy standoff in the Arctic to the, let's say, intellectual battleground of the World Economic Forum.
So, according to this telling, when President Trump arrives at Davos, it's not to shake hands and negotiate. Not at all. The argument is that he's there to dictate the terms of surrender. The huge U.S. delegation isn't there to talk. They're there to send a message. The old way of doing things is over.
Now you might be thinking, that sounds a little dramatic. But the source backs this up by pointing to how the media itself was framing it. Look at these headlines. The narrative presents these as proof that even the press saw this as a massive shift, a last-chance saloon for the old order, with the world's elite bending to Donald Trump's will.
So to really understand why Davos is painted as this epic showdown, we have to go back in time. The narrative lays out a very specific 50-year history of what it calls the old order. The whole thing, according to the source, starts right here in the early 70s. You've got the first Earth Day, the founding of the World Economic Forum, and the US dollar coming off the gold standard, all happening at once. The source bundles these together, especially calling out the environmental movement as green Malthusianism. That's basically the idea that we have too many people and not enough resources. It sees these events as the founding pillars of this old order.
And it doesn't stop there. The source then names names. It points to this network, the Club of Rome, Kissinger, Schwab, and so on, and basically draws a direct line connecting them all. They're presented as the masterminds, the architects behind this whole globalist project that started back in the 70s.
So what's the end game of all this? Well, here's the core definition the source gives for the Davos Consensus. It's painted as this 50-year-long project, a plan to get rid of individuals, sovereign countries, and replace them with a single global government run by a small group of elites.
Okay, so we've seen the old order as the source describes it. Now let's look at what's supposed to replace it. And spoiler alert, it's basically the exact opposite of everything we just talked about.
And this slide really just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's the ultimate showdown. On the left, you've got the Davos Consensus, global government, financial games, green policies that the source sees as limiting. And on the right, you have what it calls the Trump world, sovereign nations making actual stuff and pushing for scientific progress. It's presented as a complete clash of ideologies. And this line right here, the Great Reset has met the Great Disruptor, that pretty much sums up the entire argument in one sentence. It's the idea that this big, planned agenda has run headfirst into an unstoppable force, triggering a massive shift in who holds the power.
Finally, we get to the last piece of the puzzle, a brand new institution called the Board of Peace. And this isn't just some new committee. It's presented as something meant to completely replace the old ways of doing things, like the UN. So what is the Board of Peace? The source describes it as a new proposal from President Trump, designed to be way more agile and practical than the United Nations. Think of it as a tool built for this new world, a world where individual countries make deals directly with each other to solve problems.
And here are the nuts and bolts of how it would supposedly work. The first job on the list, rebuilding Gaza. To get a permanent seat at the table, you've got to pay up, $1 billion. And invitations were apparently sent out to 60 nations, including Russia. The whole idea is to resolve conflicts by bringing in outside groups to break up the old logjams.
So, that's the big finale of the story. It ends with this bold declaration. The era of the Davos Consensus is over. It's done. And a new world order, one based on builders, producers, and sovereign peace, isn't coming. It's already here. It's being born right now.
And that wraps up our look at this specific narrative. It's a pretty dramatic story of global upheaval, right? By breaking down the arguments, from that standoff in Greenland all the way to this vision for a new world, the idea is we're all just a little better equipped to think critically about these huge, complex ideas. Which, of course, leaves us with this final question to ponder.